The common traits among the perpetrators in a series of unsolved mysteries are that they commit murders brutally, continuously, and their identities remain unidentified. Some cases have been over 100 years old, but the culprits still hide behind the veil of secrecy. The strangest and most mysterious things are only revealed when everything is over. And here is part 2 of the series of mysterious killers. The brutal axe murderer. The murderer, often known as the Axeman, would typically break into the kitchen door, brutally kill the victims with an axe, and then disappear without a trace. On May 23, 1918, the Axeman first appeared, committing a brutal murder of Joseph Moggio and his wife in their apartment, which also served as the grocery store they managed. The police found a part of the back door chiseled and a bloody axe on the bed. A single message written in white chalk was left near the victim's house. "Mrs. Joseph Moggio will sit here tonight. Write that Mrs. Tony." During the investigation, the police discovered several similar murders since 1911, where all victims were Italian grocery store owners. The murderer would chisel the door and use an axe to kill them, leading the police to suspect connections to the mafia. A month later, the Axeman committed another horrifying crime. Louis Borsuma and his wife Annie Lowe were found covered in blood with multiple axe wounds. The axe was left in the bedroom. A part of the kitchen door was chiseled through, but there were no signs of theft. Annie Lowe, after being rescued, described the murderer as a young man of color, but later claimed that her own husband was the culprit. The Axeman continued to commit a series of attacks, causing panic among the citizens who began to see his shadow everywhere. Descriptions of him varied greatly, from tall and thin to dressed in women's clothing. The Axeman suddenly stopped killing in September and then disappeared. However, on March 10, 1919, he returned and committed a horrific massacre in New Orleans, where Charles died after struggling with the murderer, and Rosie and her 2-year-old daughter were attacked by him. On March 14, 1919, New Orleans Picayune Times received a letter from the Axeman, in which he claimed to be a devil from hell and threatened to kill anyone who didn't play jazz music that weekend. The entire city played jazz music and no assassinations occurred. Joseph de Villa, a local musician, composed the mysterious Axeman's jazz, which became very popular. Since then, no further murders by the Axeman were reported. On August 3, 1919, the Axeman attacked Sarah Lauman, a girl who was neither Italian or a grocery store owner. In August and September, he continued to attack but was thwarted by a man with a gun. The last attack took place in October, when the Axeman killed Mike Pepitone while his wife and 6 children were safe in the next room. A year after the last murder, Joseph Mummerer was shot dead and was believed to be connected to the Axeman. Mummerer had been imprisoned since 1911 after the first murder by the Axeman, and was released in 1918, coinciding with when the murders occurred. However, there was no evidence that Mummerer was present at any of the crime scenes. The mysterious weekly calls and the death of a single mother. The sudden disappearance of a beautiful single mother and the horrifying content of weekly calls on Wednesdays remain a mystery to this day. Dorothy, a single mother, had a terrifying time receiving threatening calls from a stranger who claimed to be watching her, and even provided information about her family. On the night of May 28, 1980, Dorothy left her 4-year-old son Sean at her parents' house and went to a company meeting. During the meeting, her colleague Conrad suffered a severe rash, so Dorothy and another colleague, Pam, took him to the hospital. There, Conrad was diagnosed with a bite from a black widow spider. After completing the paperwork, Dorothy went out to get her car and was never seen again. Pam and Conrad saw Dorothy's car speeding away and disappearing. When they contacted Dorothy's family, they said she hadn't come home yet. Dorothy's car was later found burned out. A week after Dorothy's disappearance, her mother received a call from a man claiming to have kidnapped her. The police were notified, but there was no further information about Dorothy. Her father later reported the case to the press. The mysterious weekly calls. For 4 years after Dorothy's disappearance, her family received a series of calls every Wednesday from a man claiming to have kidnapped and killed her. The police couldn't trace the origin of these calls, as they only lasted a few seconds. The last call took place in April 1984. Then in August 1984, a worker discovered Dorothy's skeleton in a rocky area north of Anaheim. Next to the remains were Dorothy's watch and ring, with the watch stopped at 12:30 on May 29, 1980, one day after she disappeared. After Dorothy's remains were found, her family received more calls from the stranger asking is she home. But then there were no more calls. The case remains unsolved nearly 40 years later. The mysterious assault and murder of a Hollywood actress. The Black Dahlia case in Los Angeles, USA, left the entire city waiting for the investigation results. On January 15, 1947, Betty Bersinger and her daughter found a pair of shoes and the bisected body of a young woman on an empty lot. Detectives Harry Hansen and Phineas Brown were dispatched to the scene and determined that the victim was killed elsewhere, and her body parts were dumped by the road. The initial cause of death was asphyxiation. On the body was the phrase "Be the Avenger" written in red lipstick. The woman killed in the Black Dahlia case was identified as Elizabeth Short, a Hollywood actress, born in 1924. She was famous for her feminine beauty and often wore a dahlia flower in her hair. Elizabeth had lived a tragic life, falling into a life of debauchery after the man she loved died in World War II. The last person to see Elizabeth Short alive was Robert Manley, a married man, on January 9, 1947. He took Elizabeth to the Biltmore Hotel, Los Angeles, and bid her farewell at 6:30 p.m. That was the last time Elizabeth was seen alive. 10 days after Elizabeth's body was discovered, her purse and a pair of shoes were found a few miles from the crime scene. On February 3, 1947, an anonymous package containing Elizabeth's personal papers and information about 75 men who had been her lovers was sent to the Los Angeles Examiner. The police believed that the sender was the murderer, but he had completely erased all traces during the investigation of the Black Dahlia case. At least 60 people confessed to being the perpetrator, but there was no evidence. Author John Gilmore believed that the perpetrator was Jack Wilson, a heavy drinker and sadist. However, Wilson died before an arrest warrant could be issued. Although the case remains unsolved, Elizabeth Short, the victim, has become a model for many literary works and films, including the novel and film Black Dahlia. Nearly 70 years after Elizabeth's death, the case still has no answer. The bag of body parts in the trash can. Seiichi Komura, a 35-year-old engineer, lived near Inokashira Park in Tokyo, Japan. His busy life left him little time to rest. Whenever he had free time, he liked to wander around the park or run around the lake. On April 21, 1994, Seiichi disappeared without leaving any message for his family. This was the first time he didn't inform his family about his whereabouts, and it was also the last time they heard from him. 2 days later, a sanitation worker discovered body parts in a trash bag. At Inokashira Park, a total of 24 body parts were found, all of which were 20 centimeters long and evenly cut. The police believed that the body had been cut with a saw, and all the blood had been washed off. However, the victim's head, chest, and genitals were not found after 3 days of DNA testing. The results confirmed that this was the body of Seiichi Kawamura. Some witnesses said they saw 2 men carrying a large bag into Inokashira Park on the night Seiichi disappeared. Despite investigating and interrogating 37,000 people, the case remains unsolved to this day. After 23 years, the case remains a great mystery to the Japanese. These mysterious murder cases serve as a testament that, despite the advancement of science and technology, humans are yet to fully comprehend the enigmatic and dark aspects of society. Join us as we continue to explore more intriguing stories in our upcoming videos.